Well, Janet Yellen has a problem, and I know people don't like her, so they say, "Yeah, she's definitely got a problem." But the problem actually is deflation, and as we're seeing these oil prices drop through the floor, they're dropping tonight over $1 again on the WTI and probably on the Brent. Her problem is deflation, and she's ending QE, and what's going on here is more like QE is supposed to battle deflation. Well, they already lowered interest rates to zero, so what the hell can you do now? Now, I got a proposal for Janet Yellen. Actually, what I would say is, I know since the markets are rigged in commodities, why don't you just raise the price of silver up to $1,000 an ounce? And, like Ben, we try to bribe Ben, we buying him beer and stuff, but it never worked. But I don't know what the hell we can bribe Janet Yellen with. But, if she raised the price on the commodity market of silver to $1,000 an ounce and kept everything low like oil and food, and we just sell our silver and buy stuff, and we'd stimulate the economy ourselves. But hey, that's a pipe dream, whatever. But the thing is with her policy, there's another thing that's going on here though. It's not even just that. You see, everybody knows that the dollar is held up by oil trade, basically, right? That oil is priced in dollars, and since we went off the gold standard during the Nixon administration, we know that the real deal is that all oil, or most oil, any oil we can pretty much control, and Saudis are a big part of that deal, it's always sold in dollars. It's not sold. So what that causes is this, and follow my logic here, that causes entire countries to have huge dollar reserves because all countries need oil to keep going, right? Whether it's home heating, manufacturing, or transportation, right? So since they have to purchase oil in dollars for the most part, not everywhere, that causes them to hold huge dollar reserves, which creates a demand for dollars, right? Simple, right? Simple. But when oil prices drop down from 110 or whatever it is down to 40 something, that creates that much, less than half the dollars have to be held in reserve to buy the same amount of oil. See? So what happens to the demand for the dollar? That's why I am I don't really get what the hell's going on here exactly. Just a freaking blatantly telling you the truth on this deal, because somehow this is not adding up where the dollar's staying strong and the oil prices are dropping so much, because it should be causing countries to reduce their dollar reserve holdings, because that's the main reason they need to have them, mainly is to purchase the oil on the markets, because it's priced in dollars. And considering that the oil prices have dropped by more than half, well, shouldn't there be a huge sell-off in the dollar reserves because they don't need as much? That's what's making me wonder about. This shit's getting dangerous in a lot of ways. I don't even know. I don't really know what the hell their damn plans are. Nobody does. The thing is, anybody can tell you they think they know, but this seems to be, I almost have to agree with Vlad over there, Vlad Putin, in this respect, because this is going to lead to a worldwide financial crisis. I know he was bitching about it because, that's 75% of the freaking money Russia gets is from, the hard currencies from, the export of oil, right, and natural gas. I know that's hurting his economy more than anybody, and their GDP. But I have to think of the angle, every time the oil drops, isn't that making it where countries have to hold a hell of a lot less dollar reserves? And here we're looking at the dollar up at 92. It makes me wonder. Actually, there's a lot of. Actually, this can change so damn fast. because I think what's going on with oil, there's actually a hell of a lot more demand going on due to a lot of unusual weather events that have been happening across the globe. I kind of went over some of them. You know, where the DAP 2030 talks about a lot of them, but I really don't want to go over all those events. But, you know, I can tell you, you know, one thing that really happened back, I think it was in 1886, 87, there was a blizzard out in the west, right? Totally changed the landscape forever in the agricultural cattle industry forever. Up until that time. But, you know, this is almost how the weather can throw a curveball into the financial plannings that you've been doing the same for many decades. Weather can actually, you know, that's why I think this deal with the oil prices, they can, you know, by 2015, I mean, I know we're already into 2015, but I mean, later on in the year, I mean, oil could be higher than it's ever been last year. It could be like way over $110 a barrel. Could be. Doesn't take much to bring it back up again. And, you know, in the meantime, we pissed off Vlad a lot. Great. Anyway, but I just want to give an example how weather can actually screw up your economic planning to the max. You know, back in the day, in the 1800s, you know, home on the range when they had the cowboys and they were, you know, herding the cattle and they were driving the herds and across the great prairies and plains, and they would graze on the land. Well, back in the day in the 1800s, the weather was really pretty favorable for that because the winters were kind of cool and, the summers were kind of cool and the winters were kind of mild. And they had plenty of grazing grass. They didn't have to store grass. They used to just graze the cattle everywhere, you know, and, you know, driving to market. This is like in Montana and stuff back in the 1800s. Well, in one winter, I think it was 1887, they had this huge blizzard after having an extraordinarily hot and dry summer. So they didn't have much grain stored up, and you know, they weren't really storing too much grain because they were really relying on grazing more than anything, even during the winter, because it seemed like back the decades before that, you know, everything was, you know, I'm getting bringing up an analogy because, you know, everybody's kind of planning on global warming, you know, with the models out here, which also has a lot to do with the oil demand, what's going on, right? But give you another example from the 1800s, you know, they were planning on grazing the cattle back in the 1800s with, you know, hey, we got a relatively cool summer. It's got a lot of, the grass is growing really good. We just graze the cattle over here, go move them over this way, and we go ahead and, you know, move them over here to eat the grass over there and stuff, and they fatten them up and stuff, so there's got plenty of fat on them for the winter, and there's plenty of freaking grass to just harvest anywhere, even though we don't own the land. It's just growing everywhere. We don't have to be playing agricultural and growing it and planting it. Just pick it up and grow it, right? Well, they had to, I think it was in 1887, they had a very hot and dry summer, and there wasn't much grass growing. The cattle were like thinned out. Then they had the blizzard, I think it was 1887, 16 inches of snow, way the hell below 0 Fahrenheit, and 90% of the cattle herd died off. You know, all the people that had all these, it changed the whole cowboy industry and stuff. It changed it from basically all the ranchers and the grazing and all that other stuff. It just overnight destroyed the entire industry. But, you know, that's an example of how one extraordinary weather event could change the price of a commodity, you know, or drastically alter the economic landscape in a year that has been going the same way for decades. And that happened in the 1800s, though. But, you know, maybe that's not a perfect analogy, but, you know, I'm thinking about these oil prices and us getting into the 400-year cycle of going into the middle mini ice age, and I'm thinking, man, Not a smart way to punish Vlad. Now, actually, if I was going to punish Vlad, you know what I would do? Now, this is something unrelated. I'm going to talk about prepping here, but what I would do is I'd have him sign up for Obamacare or penalize him and make him pay 2% of his salary. And this way, that would make him, or then they could give him all these funky meds from Obamacare or something like that. That would hurt him. That'd be better than sanctions. But, I'm also going to tell you this. You're probably going to be fine with this silver because I'm thinking these commodities are going to boomerang suddenly when it happens. But, the other thing is, and I don't want to say it's the government per se doing this, because, the hidden hand behind the government has always been where the government becomes a problem for the average person. The hidden hand behind the government where the government becomes a problem for the average person is the money bastards, industry. People who have to have a steady income stream no matter what. And it's, well, I heard there's stories about, they don't like people living off the grid and stuff right now. There's a lot of stuff like that going on. And they can also nail you for, like, say, for instance, you put up a lot of solar panels and you're living off the grid, They can hit you with taxes by saying, we can assess your property a hell of a lot higher and tax you on the assessments of your solar panel installations, They can nail you that way. But I think that, the real powers that be is, I guess it's indirectly the government. But the problem is when we have a problem with the government against the middle class, it really becomes that way because of the big money interests that control the government and use it as a tool against the middle class. That's usually 99% of the problem. But, one of the things that's going on today, too, is that you're seeing in a lot of rules and stuff that to try to discourage prepping. And I would think that when silver does go up a lot, you're probably going to have a problem with taxation. I know back in the 70s, late 70s, when oil went up really fast, the commodity oil, when it went up, actually I think oil might boomerang the other way because I think the weather's going to be a factor in that major. Well, they just passed an excise tax on oil, on the the gains, the capital gains. They passed an excise tax. I think there's going to be a lot more impetus to keep people on the grid. I saw stuff from last year about, it's not so much, I don't want to be totally critical of the EPA, but you know what it is? It's like these NGOs and non-governmental organizations, the ones that are funded by big money. They try to influence the EPA as much as possible to make it so you can't do things on your own, like use wood-burning stoves or make your own fuel, store your fuel, or whatever. And that's going across the whole broad spectrum of staying independent and away from, getting your money freaking taken from you by having to. Well, that's how that's what the elite, the money guys want. They want a steady. They don't want you to have it where you're independent. They want you to be hooked. They want your meat hooks in you where you always got to pay them, right? So there's actually a lot of discouragement for prepping going throughout the world. And I'm almost thinking that when silver goes up a lot, they're going to try to tax the crap out of the capital gains on it. That's what I think they might do. And the only way around it is direct trade and barter. So you might be thinking about some of that deal coming up because, it's really not the government directly, though. It really isn't the government directly. That's a lot of things where people comment, they bitch about, I guess it is the government doing it where we see it on a, one-to-one. But, really it is the hidden hand of the money bastards that use the government to freaking fleece the middle class. That's really like even you see that garbage going on with Obamacare now. I think they're talking about a 450% average increase of generic, not even the freaking name ones, generic prescriptions costs. Generics. So, in other words, if you're a person that could say, I could do all that stuff with herbalistic medicine, they ain't gonna like that. And they're probably gonna try to freaking put a lid on getting that information out, too. Now, this kid, actually I get some arguments on some of these people on YouTube here about some of the stuff. I put out a lot of alternative health videos. I just got to comment on this as a side note. And I will not put out something that is not really legit. And, I found out a lot of things that are popularly put out on YouTube that this cures that and that cures this and this is a lot of that stuff is exaggerated to the hilt, man. And, one of the things, since I'm talking about silver, is colloidal silver. Even though it works against every damn known pathogen or microbe in a petri dish, in the body, it's not super duper like these people are saying. I gotta mention this in this video, man. I know I'm getting hit with a lot of freaking thumbs down left and right, but you know what? I'm not trying to freaking just please the crowd. I'm trying to freaking be accurate and freaking tell you the damn truth freaking for real, which means I wind up fighting the mainstream and the alternative at the same time. Because the alternative, man, they seem to freaking think every damn thing's a conspiracy no matter what. Everything's a false flag. And anything, in pharma is 110% bad. It's not like that, man. It's like a mixed bag, man. That's really what it is. And, Janet Yellen, I'm actually, I don't really mind this lady. I thought she was going to be the one that was going to be Federal Reserve. And I know somebody's going to say, you're a fan of the Federal Reserve. No, I'm not a fan of the Federal Reserve. But you know what? You ain't going to get rid of it by snapping your fingers and just because Ron Paul makes a speech, okay? We all know that deal, I mean, it's a complicated, slow process, actually, and it's going to take a lot of work because you can't unravel what's been done easily. You can't just vote it out of existence. But she got a tough job with this deal because, it looks like we're going into deflation, and she's ending QE. And the interest rates are zero, so what the hell do you do? What do you do? Because deflation, actually, these oil prices are really causing deflation. Energy is a good part of the consumer price index. Even though they say it's not, it is. It's figured in there. So, this is going to be a major, but you know what? I don't think it's going to last that long. So anyway, I figured to give you a little bit of a roundabout update here on several aspects of things that you're not hearing from the others. And this kid, just to give you a heads up, I'm not going to freaking argue with somebody for 50 million years on YouTube going back and forth because they have a religious belief about freaking colloidal silver being a cure-all for everything. I'm going to tell you right now, there's a lot of stuff that in the body, the way it works and the way it works outside the body, different. But I actually do put a lot of stuff out that, and I can't be blatantly saying it cures something, but I got to tell you that what I put out, actually a lot of stuff with the vitamin C, with the Ebola. I'm kind of sidetracking here because I got to get off on this garbage because, colloidal silver is not going to cure Ebola, period. But vitamin C might. I got to say it probably will, because if you use enough of it and you use a medical doctor, there's been New York doctors that said ozone with vitamin C. Also, another famous guy, also first aid was melatonin. Sidetracking here, but kind of related to silver because a lot of people in this silver, they believe in this colloidal silver. It's good stuff, but it ain't a cure-all. Got to mention that. But the other thing is here, the main point of this video is that by the oil prices going down, they got two predicaments. One is deflation. And how the hell do you end QE when you have deflation going on? and interest rates are zero. And the other problem is, and it doesn't seem to be reflecting right now in the numbers, but as oil prices go down, it should create a lot less demand for U.S. dollars because people need to hold, like in other words, oil is like less than half the price. So that means they have to hold less than half the dollar reserves to buy oil on the open markets, right? Yet you're seeing the dollar up to 92 on the indicator. Now I know that's in relation to a basket of currencies, like it's in relation to everything else that's going on in the world, but it doesn't make sense, man. And sometimes when something doesn't make sense, you can say, well, that's just how it is, but when something doesn't make sense like this, it's almost telling me, it's a temporary situation. Because I'm thinking, aren't people selling off? Aren't they reducing their dollar holdings because they need only half the dollars to buy the same amount of oil? Isn't that going to freaking cause a greatly reduced demand for dollars across the world? And where the hell are those dollars going to go? Do they go back here? I mean, this is what's really weird about it. This deflation. I'm going to leave you with this thought. What we have, where we have this seeming deflation, it may be where hyperinflation's right on the freaking horizon. Maybe I'm making a drama thing here, but I don't think so. But you know what? I'm almost comparing it to. I'm almost comparing it to when a tsunami hits. But don't get wrapped up in the phrase, but just to give you an example, like as a little bit of a drama phrase here. When a tsunami hits, what happens before the tsunami hits? The water in the ocean pulls way back. Right? But I think it gave you solid reasons to think that, since oil's so low, they should be selling off their dollar reserves. Where's the dollars going to go? They got to be coming back here, right? Right? Even though the numbers aren't reflecting it right away. But I'm almost thinking that this deflation is going to lead to hyperinflation. It's going to boomerang the other way around. And it's kind of weird. I know Vlad is getting all pissed off and bent out of shape that, oil's down and it's killing his freaking economy in Russia like crazy. But in a way, he's right, because it's going to kill the whole world economy. It's like you don't want too radical changes too much too fast. Just like the example I gave with the weather and the cattle. If, that happened over a gradual period of time, you could adjust for it. It happens all at once, you can't adjust for it. And the thing that's going on today with the weather is probably creating an extraordinary demand for oil, and I don't see how to keep the price down. And so, unfortunately, our big ace in the cards is it's not unfortunately, but unfortunately, it seems that the powers that be that are behind the government, right, NGOs and big money that are using the government to clamp down on the middle class, is actually screwing up prepping. And, it's not good for the future of the silver crowd, too, in a lot of ways. So you might be wanting to think about barter in the future, because I think if silver does go way the hell up, they're going to excise tax the hell out of it. So you might be wanting to be thinking about barter. So anyway, figured I'd just give you a quick update on some things that they're not normally putting out on other channels, and I don't think they are. I don't know what they do on other channels. I try to go my own freaking way and give you information that's accurate and correct all the way. And I do not go put out things with an eye to see what's popular or not. I know if I put out videos about saying, colloidal silver is going to cure everything, people love me more, but I'm not doing that. I know I'm going against the grain on the alternative there, but I'm definitely not a shill for pharmas like some people are thinking that. I'm like, get the hell out of here. Definitely not. I can't stand pharma. But I know they got a use too. So anyway, that's my update.